Welcome to Ben Leo Tonight with me, Alex Armstrong. Now, in just 51 hours' time, Britain will have become, officially, a two-tier justice state. A taxpayer-funded, unelected, unaccountable, anti-democratic quango, the Sentencing Council has handed down a set of guidelines that are, in my blunt opinion, plainly discriminatory. Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick has said that Shabana Mahmood, the Justice Secretary, will preside, in his words, will preside over a two-tier justice system that is biased against white people and Christians.
The Secretary has been totally asleep at the wheel. She didn't even know about these sentencing guidelines until I raised them with her in the House of Commons. She then held a meeting and a week later wrote a letter to the Sentencing Council. They've come back now and totally rebuffed her. She's been humiliated. She hasn't brought forward emergency legislation. She rebuffed my bill that would have fixed this. The best time to have done emergency legislation would have been when these two-tier guidelines were first approved. The second best time is to do it now.
Yeah, the Justice Secretary previously promised the people of this country that there would never be two-tier justice under this Labour government.
As somebody who's of an ethnic minority background myself, I do not stand for any differential treatment before the law for anyone of any kind, and there will never be a two-tier sentencing approach under my watch or under this Labour government.
Yeah, well, that aged like milk, didn't it? And after being made aware of the two-tier guidance, Shabana Mahmood wrote a scathing letter to the Sentencing Council and demanded they renege on these new guidelines. And like many of you at home surely would have thought, good, that's that. The highest authority on law and order in our land, the democratically elected representative of the people, has told the council to cease and desist. How wrong was I? In what I can only describe as the most astounding display of arrogance, the Sentencing Council turned the Secretary of State, turned around to her and gave her a big metaphorical middle finger. Now, what you'd expect to follow this blatant attack on our democracy would be the sacking and shutting down of the entire council. But rather than act as she said she would, the Secretary of State for Justice has done nothing. Absolutely nothing. This is despite stating in her letter to the Sentencing Council that she believes these guidelines represent differential treatment under which someone's outcomes may be influenced by their race, culture, or religion. She says this is unacceptable, and I formally set up my objections to this letter to the Sentencing Council last week. I am extremely disappointed by the Council's response. All options are on the table, and I will legislate if necessary. So, just when you thought the Sentencing Council couldn't push their luck any further, oh, they did. They doubled down. Not content with pushing thinly guised racist sentencing, they're now going after border security. That's right, you've heard me. They've drafted up yet more guidance, and this one's really going to sting, so buckle up. The draft guidance instructs judges to consult a document called the Equal Treatment Bench Book. A book, in my opinion, that's dripping with left-wing propaganda. Any guesses what might be in it? Here's a little gem for you. From the book itself, the UK has significantly fewer asylum applications than Germany, which received over 200,000, or France, which received over 150,000. Well, what do you make of that? I wonder. But hold on, because it gets worse. This book, this thing here that I've got, this massive pile of rubbish, proudly displays Labour's definition of Islamophobia. That bafflingly conflates racism with religion. Importantly, this definition is not yet written into law. But what this new draft guidance will do is sneak it in through the back door. And surprise, surprise, the Muslim Council of Britain, an organisation that multiple governments have refused to engage with due to some of its radical opinions, get an honourable mention in this book. But here's why this all matters. Because this madness has real consequences. These new sentencing rules could let hundreds of foreign criminals dodge deportation even more easily than they are already. the new draft guidelines are pushing for sub-12-month sentences for immigration crimes like deception and illegal entry. And guess what? If it's your first offence, you get a discount. Our justice system is not only bankrupt, it's being treated like a supermarket meal deal for foreign criminals, while white men are targeted with harsher sentences. Is this not just that perfect example of the so-called deep state? A bunch of bureaucrats undermining elected politicians, writing and changing the guidelines at their own will. Sounds like the deep state to me. It is as clear as day to me that this sentencing council is not just blatantly undermining our parliamentary system, our democracy, it's also making a mockery of our once globally admired justice system. Right, well, let's get the thoughts of my fantastic panel here tonight. It's the best panel I've seen for a very long time. Peter Blexley, Linda Jubilee, Paul Richards. Lovely for you all to be here with me tonight. Paul, I want to start with you, because obviously, a bit of balance here, GBNews, as we do. How can this happen under Shabana Mahmood's watch, or are the Tories to blame?
There's a lot to unpack here, isn't there? I mean, first of all, it is interesting that Robert Jenrick is one of the very few Tory frontbenchers who's cutting through and doing any running at all. I think most people watching this would struggle to name many of the shadow cabinet, but he's one that seems to be making a name for himself. He's put Shabana Mahmood in a position where I think she will have to bring legislation forward because this Quango state, I don't believe in the deep state, but there is a suggestion that Quangos can have too much power, and I think in this case that's what's going on. So I think she will probably Monday or Tuesday do exactly that. Then on the MCB, I was the special advisor in government where we started to say we're not going to listen to the MCB and not have them around the table. And I haven't changed my position in those last 20 odd years. They should not be influencing government policy.
Yeah, Peter, shocking that this equal treatment bench book is being used essentially to sneak these things through the back door, referencing those sorts of organisations like the Muslim Council for Britain, which, even the Tories wouldn't touch them with a barge pole because of some of their radical views. What does that say about this bureaucracy underlying the British justice system?
I would urge anybody, if they've got a few minutes to spare, to go online and look at the nobodies that populate the sentencing council, OK? It is full of the kind of people who won't wake up tomorrow morning to find that the tools have been stolen from their work van or that their car's been taken from the driveway. They're not the kind of people who are plagued by crime like so many of us today in Britain, of course, including shopkeepers and any woman who has the misfortune to travel on public transport. They're not those kind of people. They are detached from reality. They've got one senior police officer who's about to retire from Leicestershire Police, a chief constable. He's risen without trace, like so many of the other fools that are on it. And quite frankly, Shabana Mahmood could dismiss this waste of time, effort and money at the stroke of a pen. And the sooner she does that, the better.
Yeah, Linda, this is really disturbing. I mean, for me, this is exactly what Liz Truss was talking about when she said the deep state. I've seen so many secretaries of state from the last government come out and say, I couldn't do anything because of the bureaucracy, and they're all ridiculed.
Absolutely ridiculous. And I couldn't agree more with Peter. I too have looked at the members of the sentencing board, and what I don't really understand is why we can't just get rid of it, because it's a quango. If we can get rid of NHS England, which is effectively the biggest quango in the world, we should be able to deal with this. What disturbs me about it is the members of the sentencing board are judges. There's a police officer, there's a domestic violence expert, there's a probation officer, but they're judges and senior lawyers. Why do you need two sets of judges? When I was a young reporter, and I've covered hundreds of court cases, magistrates all the way up to the Old Bailey, you relied on the judge to deal with the mitigating circumstances of the crime that was before him. I don't understand this extra layer, regardless of what it says.
Paul, listen, this is, like I said, 51 hours is dropping imminently. Every second that goes by, we're heading towards a two-tier justice state, which Shabana Mahmood promised wouldn't happen. Why has she failed to legislate?
Well, I think it's a good example where ministers do need to get a grip. And I think new ministers do take a while to sort of settle in. But after the really good ones realise that they can drive the machine and they can take decisions and they can take on vested interests, the blob or whatever it might be. And I think Shabana Mahmood is in that mould. I think she's somebody who will now take a strong view on this because, she sold the House very clearly. You heard the clip there. There will be no two-tier sentencing on her watch. And so she's laid her reputation on the line here. I think there'll be action, before the week is out.
But if she doesn't, and there's no guarantees that she will, if she doesn't, as a bit of public service broadcasting, I would like to now say to every white-faced man and woman in the country, don't go out there and commit crime, because in all likelihood you'll be treated less favourably than somebody of colour who commits exactly the same crime and comes from exactly the same background as you.
And what about the core principle that actually Lady Justice is blind? No one is supposed to know what colour or creed or religion or sex or whatever the perpetrator is. Justice is supposed to be blind and therefore fair. What happened to that principle?
And for me, I mean, many countries around the world base their justice system off
ours.
On ours. An incredibly heralded system throughout the world. This is really going to pour hot water over that, don't you think, Paul?
Well, there is that danger, and I thought there's a political dimension to this, which is, of course, it opens Labour up to this attack of, hashtag two-tier Keir and all this stuff. And the special advisors and Number 10 will understand that and be very aware of it as well. So they'll be wanting to sort of close off that flank too, as well as the legal aspects of this. There's the political bit too, which is why I think there is a head of steam now for some action to be taken sooner rather than later. Let's see, but let's hope so.
Yeah, I mean, Peter, I just can't wrap my head around the fact that even though Robert Jenrick put a bill in that Labour could have voted for, I know the optics of them voting for a Tory bill.
I mean, that's not going to happen, though, is it? Because that was a stunt. I mean,
well, of course it is, but that's politics for you, right? We know the game. We know what the Tories are doing. But if they could do it, it just winds me up that the Justice Secretary who made that statement we showed in the clip there at the start, saying there would never be two-tier justice in Britain, she's gone ahead and let this happen. She's had plenty of time to act.
But wouldn't it be refreshing if politicians actually did something for the general good?
Quite right.
Irrespective of who came up with the idea.
Absolutely
agreed. Of course, we have such conflict and within our politics that so often the people that suffer are us, the public, who work hard, pay our taxes, obey the law, and yet get shafted time and time again by various bits of legislation, and in this example, a quango. It's appalling. Something needs to be done very, very soon. But you're seeing this unevenness creep into so much of society when people who are actually white, indigenous, born here are being prejudiced against, and I think we have another story later in the show, which is a perfect example of that.
We do. Plenty more to talk about on the show with lots of these stories tonight, but I just want to read something out to you for our audience's sake, so beg your pardon, not looking at the screen so much here. The stated intention and purpose of these guidelines and the SC Sentencing Council is to avoid inconsistent sentences amongst people of differing backgrounds. The fact that this relates to the preparation of a pre-sentence report, which will not determine the sentence, but is designed to leave the judge or magistrate who is determining the sentence to be better informed about the offender. Frequently, the information provided in these pre-sentence reports will not assist an offender's prospect of avoiding a custodial sentence, rather the reverse. The guidelines do not make a custodial sentence less likely for someone from an ethnic, cultural, faith minority simply by reference to their ethnicity, culture or faith. The rule of law requires all offenders to be treated fairly and justly by judges, which is acknowledged by the Sentencing Council. Paul, what do you make of that statement?
Whose quote is that?
I'll get that clarified for you in just a second, but this, I believe, is coming perhaps from the government. But what do you make of that?
Well, it's either from the Quango itself trying to justify its document, or it might be from the department, but it's not a political response, is it? It's a sort of fairly, weasel-worded sort of response.
Regardless, that's the sort of argument they would make. And is that fair?
Well, they're trying to justify what's going on here, and they're explaining in the legal sense that it doesn't, actually impact on. But it's not a political response, which is why I return to my theme, which is ministers need to get a grip on this.
Salad. Right. At the end of the day, the punishment should fit the crime. It's a fairly simple core principle. You don't need wordy statements. You don't need woolly words. You don't need word salad. And you just need to be completely...
And I would say Shabana Mahmood's statement that you actually clipped there from the House was very clear. And we've discussed this before, but she was absolutely saying no way and not on her watch. So I think that should give the rest of the system a clear steer as
and
to
just
what
to clarify, that
now.
statement wasn't from the Sentencing Council. That's a legal statement. And just for the clarification of the audience there.
Right.
Anyway, moving on,